Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of my Stoic Circus. And today we're going to talk about impacts, comebacks. It's never too late to come back. So stay tuned here in just a moment as we get started on my Stoic Circus. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my Stoic Circus. Today is, what is it, September 21st. It's literally almost 7:30 in the morning. And I was thinking about this earlier this week about, trying to plan out my episodes, how often to come on my show, when it was time to really make my show, where to make impacts, so on and so forth. So there was a lot of thoughts going into today. I wasn't really necessarily going to record today, but I have kind of a busier morning tomorrow. So usually my thought was to do Monday and Tuesday and a Friday show and a Saturday show. And just to manage those things and to do and come on live, stream, record, edit, all that great stuff. It takes some strategy. It does take some thoughtfulness and not just to wing your episodes. So when I was thinking about, how do I really want to go forward with my podcasting career and how the impacts are going to take place. Where's my real comeback? How am I going to get improve? This was stirring in my mind, and a lot of people are also in the same position. They're thinking of how to restructure their lives, and maybe they have to get a new type of employment, or they have a new relationship in their life. Something has drastically changed for many people. For whatever reasons they may be. But I was reading in the Daily Stoic and the Daily Data a couple of things that made some significant impacts on me, particularly. Like, I've always felt like, man, I'm ahead and then I feel like I'm 10 steps behind. And when am I going to not just have my big break, but have more of a solid, hey, steady, mentality to make life work out for me. And so I was like, okay, well, am I taking the right strategy in my daily mindset, when I get distracted or sidetracked? And it happens to all of us. We get sidetracked, even sometimes the littlest thing or the biggest thing. And when we think about those sidetracks, it's like, how long does it take you out for? So when I'm about to read in just a moment, to think about this in context, Marcus Aurelius talked about, exactly where are you going to be when you get sidetracked and what are you going to do about it? And how do you stay in the rhythm of what's best for you? So from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, you can buy this anywhere, Barnes and Noble, Amazon. Just find Meditations. I like Gregory Hayes's edition and translation, but I also like the Barnes and Noble. They also have a translation too. And what it said this morning, it says, when forced as it seems by circumstances into utter confusion, get a hold of yourself quickly. Don't be locked out of rhythm any longer than necessary. You'll be able to keep the beat if you constantly returning to it. So that really says a lot right there. So say like something happens, right? Something drastically happens, whether it's good or bad. It could be like you just won a major prize, or you got gifted a sum of money, or maybe you had something tragically happen and you are responsible for many things, a business, a family, whatever it may be. But when you look at these things, you're like, okay, this is an emotional interruption. And so Marcus really kind of spelled it out. He's like, think about this. He says, when forced as it seems by circumstances. Okay, so initially the thing has got your attention, you're locked in, you see what it is. And then he goes on into, utter confusion. It's like, okay, I'm shock and awe. I now have to stop. What am I going to do? What's my strategy? Where am I going to really put myself when this? Now, some people or many people will stay locked and stuck. And there are times it's completely understandable. But like all things, all emotions float. They always ebb and flow, kind of like a wave or the ocean. It doesn't really necessarily stay, but that's determined on you. But he goes on to explain, he says, get a hold of yourself quickly. The sooner you can get a grip on actually what is happening to you, not letting it sink in too much, and understand that whatever's going on, you've got to keep going exactly the way you were. So, say, like when you're the best way to explain it, where you see some athletes performing at the peak, and then after that peak, they stop training exactly the way that it got them to that performance. Or an injury happens and they don't have faith in it, their performance level starts deteriorating because their belief, their mindset, their skill set is not being practiced. And I talked about this earlier in this last week on Breakout and Clubhouse. And what happens is the deterioration of the condition that got them at their peak. It means in good times, oh man, maybe I don't need to practice, or maybe I don't need to read. Maybe I don't need to journal. Maybe I don't need to do something, the critical elements that got them there to be absolutely their best, or to be able to handle just even regular everyday life, right? So you've had something that made an impact, but now you're thinking to yourself, well, guess what? This thing happened. I'm good. Let's slip off a little bit. Or this thing happened. I'm really hurt. I'm really bothered. My best friend betrayed me, or maybe I lost a relationship, or maybe my dad or my mom died. And depending on the circumstance, you really have to look at, give yourself grace and give yourself space. Now, many people explain grace as like just a period of understanding and patience, which I strongly believe that would be my definition of grace. But it also means allowance. And when we look at, no matter what you believe, I don't care what religion you come from or non-religion, when you give yourself grace, you're allowing the things to happen and take place as they're intended to, but doesn't mean you stay there. And I really talked about this on Monday about retraining your pain, or training your suffering, over and over. There's some people who got into a bad car accident and they're blaming their bad posture on that car accident. But I asked them, so what's your rehabilitation been like all these years? And they'll say, what rehabilitation? There's the key. So if you don't want to be hurt, is it painful to rehab yourself? And it is. So no matter what the event is, no matter what happens, an impact came in your life. It just landed, boom, the thud's there. And maybe you're out for a month or two. Maybe you're out for a little while. So you need to recollect. Now, where do you begin? How do you start your comeback? It's the point in which you have decided, like, hey, you know what? I don't feel that great, but I got to make some impacts. I got to make some improvements and changes. And the number one thing I hear from many of my friends and my colleagues, they will say, I need to make a change. I'm going to change. Great. You have affirmed now a decision that something needs to exist, needs to happen. But the decisions that follow and support that decision, the work, the practice, the belief, those don't come so easy. Those come in their own elements. How do we begin to improve where we're at with belief? Number one, whatever has happened, you have to abandon the reasons why it has stayed. You have to say, I cannot put my thoughts in that. So what do I got to do? I've got to exchange something for what is training to be a habit and possibly a bad tactic or characteristic about yourself. I was talking to some friends the other day, and one of them was saying, hey, Jason, I need to drink water before I need to drink coffee. And I said, I fully support that. So here's your challenge. Told them, they took it. And guess what? Here it is, 3 days in, they told me, yes, I'm drinking water. Before coffee, that one incremental change could drastically affect somebody on how they're performing, even just a small part of their morning. And so now that consistent, 3 days in, you turn 3 days into 14 days, right? Then from 14 to 21, 21 into 28, that's multiples of 7, right? From that, and you prime it down, it's either 3. But it starts, once you get into those first 3 days, now it starts to become a rhythm. Then it becomes a belief. Then that belief is something that's a part of your life. Same with pain. Pain works the same way. The more that you try to avoid it, the more that you think about it, it escalates. There are times you can't avoid it, but where can we, Jason, what else can we do? And that's where I'll tell you, get your body moving. If you feel like crap, if you don't feel like you're the best person that you possibly can be, understandable, but it's not going to move unless you get your body moving. And sometimes it takes your body moving to change your mind. Going on morning walks without your phone or without a technical check-in, seeing what's happening on your social media, or perhaps check in on what's going on with the news. How is the world falling apart, or is it improving? And for many of us, we think that our world is declining. Why? Is it because the monopolization of a few people? Could be, or organizations? Could be, but that's not your business. Your business is to really focus on what makes you the best person. You don't have to worry about perfect, because perfect really means good enough. And when people get this fixation, I'm a perfectionist, they're really announcing, I will not stop until I get this right. But that could be very toxic at the same time, because then it creates a belief system that you won't allow yourself to learn until you get the sequence of events or chain of things in their place, and then you can move on. And that really kind of bugs me personally, because I've never said I'm a perfectionist, but I've had a lot of friends who tell me I'm a perfectionist, Jason. And I'm like, and I appreciate them telling me that, because it lets me know exactly where their mindset and where their place of value is. When people say they're perfectionist, I ask them every single time, or majority of the time, what have you learned about the last attempt? What have you done in rehearsal, in practice? And do you need to take a step away? Right. And when they really take time and just slow it down and think, then they start to discover their learning ability. Now, when I read The Daily Dad by Ryan Holiday, and I just got this book, I have not read this every day. I don't know. I just kind of, um, I've definitely been facing certain things. In The Daily Dad, Ryan goes on to talk about raise your children to be a why child. And what is that? So I'll read a little bit on page 295 of his, Daily Dad, just like the Daily Stoic. But this month of September, it's titled Raise a Reader. And Ryan goes on to explain, he says, F. Scott Fitzgerald's short story, Head and Shoulders, young prodigy Horace explains, I was a wild child and I wanted to see what wheels go around. My father was a young economist professor at Princeton. He brought me up in the system of answering every question I asked him to the best of his ability. A why child. What delightful phrase. Isn't that who you're trying to raise? A child who knows how to figure things out, a child who isn't content with taking things at face value, who isn't satisfied with simple explanations. Can this be annoying? Absolutely. It can be and get them in trouble. But curious is better than complacent, and annoying is better than ignorant. To be sure, there will be times when you're tired to answer their questions. There will be other moments when you feel their questions are inappropriate. But in those moments, you must pause and breathe and remember that you have seeded this habit. You have to make sure water it too and do your best, never stamp it out. The more questions they ask, the better, not just for you or for them, but for the world they live in. Now, why is that so important? Because a lot of times, even adults, even, Ryan's explaining this like, hey, how to tell your kids, encourage their kids to be asking questions. And he said it, don't worry about the face value. You could be rehearsing as a pragmatist or a perfectionist that things are so complicated you can't live in simplicity. And so you're complacent with that position and it creates that belief system. That's why I said get your body moving. You want to change something, you've got to tweak what makes the existence of your habit or your belief. So making that comeback, making an improvement in your daily life, making something exist in such a way where you begin to understand what matters to you most, and not everybody else, not the world, not the global news, not the politics, not who's running for election, or what was the latest thing that I heard on TikTok? There was a guy who explained, like, hey, there are too many oil nations. 80% of the world oil nations are now a part of BRICS. And what they're saying is like, hey, the dollar's going to collapse. It's going to fall apart. Yes, those are important things to know. However, resilience and making a comeback and making a change sometimes means you got to trash the old system the way that it worked. And so, you know what? Starting over from scratch is okay. Sometimes you just have to take out the old way of thinking and say, all right, I'm now ready to be a learner again and curious. And that's what Ryan was kind of talking about. He was basically saying, don't be complacent of what you've had and that the perils are. Be curious about the improvements that need to take place. What do you accept? Where do you just are you just standing or are you moving? And I'm sorry, I'm always moving. There are times I need to stand and plant my feet and brace for the impact. Yeah, but the impact is meant to move you forward or backwards and understand when they are doing each. It's never too late in your life to really start something brand new. It's not until your deathbed where you can't move, even the last moments of your life, which is so interesting because I remember when my grandmother was passing away and I remember seeing her. She went into the hospice care or went in the hospital a few days, matter of fact, right about Thanksgiving. And what was so sad was when I seen her in hospice and I got to talk to her and she was still cognate. She died within 2 weeks of that encounter. I remember my grandma B, Grandma Barajas, hey, I love you. What she was saying to me, she pulled me close and she goes, Jason, I want to talk to you. I said, sure. What is it, Grandma? And she said to me very clearly, she said, I want to tell you I'm sorry. And I want you to tell your mother from me, I'm sorry. I'm like, Grandma, what are you sorry about? The way that I treated you and the way that I treated her. And she admitted at that time that something that I had known for quite a long time. My mom even explained it. She said, hey, your grandma tried to take me or take you and your brother and sister away from me when you're really little, when me and your father were divorcing. And I said, yeah, I kind of know that. And so my grandma was like saying, ask her to forgive me. And she explained the story, you know, about why it came to be. And I said to her, I said, Grandma, but you know what was great is my mom, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. Why? Because my mom took all the risks and all the trust and belief to do something different, to walk away from my father, who she was married to for about, I think, about 8 years, I told my grandma, I said, remember, I said, "You know what? Things that don't belong don't stay, you know? And if we didn't belong to you, we didn't stay. But we came to see you and be a part, so don't worry about it. You're forgiven." But I told my mom, and my mom kinda at the time, I remember that day, my mom kinda said, "You know what? I wish I coulda heard those words." And I said to my mom, I said, "Well, why don't you go see her?" And a few days after that, um, she was not cognate. She was not, like, she was in so much pain. She had, like, what is it? A stomach cancer. She was dying. And the mind deteriorated, so she didn't get that chance. But I said, "Just mom, hey," and that's not my mom's mom. That my grandma is my dad's mom, you know, and it being the daughter-in-law, and my mom just kinda, like, sat there all these years. Finally, I get that apology, but I didn't get to hear it myself. And I said to her, I said, "Does it really matter? Does it matter more that you heard it or that you know it?" And my mom paused, and she just kinda walked away, and she later on, she came on to me, and she did say that, I guess it was more important to know it. And she cried, because thinking about all those times she had to take a risk. She coulda just accepted, and my grandma would have taken and raised us, and then what? An overpacked household, you know? The same thing happened to some of my cousins, and their lives weren't so as good as mine, I have a wonderful mom, you know? And though she has her quirks and innuendos and, yeah, her traumas and stuff, but my mom decided to make, her own comeback, her own impact. If I stay here with my kids, this is what's gonna happen. Even though I know my kids need their dad, she had to take a risk. So the point is that taking a risk may be getting out of your complete comfort zone. It may be where you have to literally say, "Well, it's time to move on. No matter how bad and how stressful it is, I have to move on. I have to go forward." And taking those next steps, just like Marcus Aurelius was saying, get in the rhythm. You'll be able to keep the beat if you're constantly returning to it. That means where your next steps are taking place. So with that being said, it's very important to allow yourself to learn, to feel, and if you need to grieve, give yourself a time to grieve. Like, you know what? I'm gonna allow myself to feel sad this week, if that's what you deem, or a month. I'm gonna allow myself to take some time, reflect, and then I still have to move forward. Because your loved ones and the people that care about you don't want to see you stuck. Eventually, when people, as they say, sulk, when you're done sulking, you can literally, I guess, put yourself in becoming toxic, and then those people walk away from you. People don't stay, for just any reason. And when you realize what you can do, even while you're going through tragedy or a good time, doesn't matter either way, good or bad, sad or whatever. You can have that time to be able to give yourself an allowance to feel, but you have to say, if I'm feeling sad, then guess what? Maybe I need to take some walks. Maybe I need to take and drink water, make something happen for myself, journal out my feelings, allow myself to train out of it, you know, especially recovering from injuries. I noticed through some friends of mine who gotten some really bad injuries at work. And they said one of the most painful parts is the beginning steps of rehab, going to a physical therapist. I said, "Well, what makes it so painful?" It's like that my mind and my muscles don't work the same, and pushing just to move my leg and make it bendable. is painful, right? And I said, "Well, that's kinda interesting, if you ask me, that you are pushing through the pain to get that flexibility back or that movement back." And I said, "Well, then what's the next thing?" He's like, "The pain makes me not wanna do it again. But I know if I push through the pain, eventually it gets a little better each time. Not much, but, in increments of improvement." And that's where James Clear's book on Atomic Habits, he says, a sequence of events that have been purposefully implemented. That means you're doing little bits every single time, the same thing to improve the situation, that daily stretch every single time will eventually lead to bigger outcomes. But it also can be bad too, because if you do the same thing and not being allowing yourself to be a learner, then it could be a problem. Staying curious. Like, for example, the best way I can explain it is when people say, I know. It kinda like is an insult, and I've said it too, like, whenever, my lady, talks to me, and she's telling me something that I already know, and I literally, at times, have to bite my tongue, and I have to say, "I understand. Thank you." Cut it off. Cut my tongue off, because if I let my tongue fly, it's gonna be a debate, an argument, and then that person feels like you never understood or appreciated them, and that's false. What people have to realize, or what they get to realize, if they're lucky, is how they talk to you. Do they listen to themselves as well? What you dish out is gonna come back, you know? Is your advice, is it applicable to you as well as another person? That's where you're making the understanding work. "Hey, I understand how you feel about that. You have an opinion about what I should do differently." And they're not gonna understand all the simple ways that you have to live your life, how to manage finances, how to put exercise in your daily life. Like, it's like, I hate to say it this way, it's like a fat person telling me how to eat healthy, and they're not doing it. They know the knowledge, and they understand what's putting them there. But when you see the actual effort and work, and they're not doing it, then you're kinda like, "Well, you're a hypocrite. Thanks for the information, but why do I need to listen to somebody who is stuck in their mediocrity, in their body position?" I don't understand all their circumstances, and this may sound mean, but it doesn't mean their information is invalid either. And that's where taking grace is really important, to making improvements, to making gradual shifts, and annually those shifts become things. They've either become better or worse, but you're gonna have to determine that. And like Ryan says in his book, when be a why child or a why person, ask questions, start to discern, start to figure things out, stop accepting defeat as a stopping point and never going forward. Look, I've lost, I can remember track meets. Many times I lost races, but that didn't make me stop. And it's still that mentality in my life. I have fallen, I have made mistakes, I have failed miserably, horribly, repetitively, but I'm still determined to make those shifts and changes. And guess what? I get the discipline down, I get the work down, and guess what? I have a lot more freedom, and I can, as Epictetus would say, narrow the focus, narrow the distractions. I'm not so winging it all the time. I know exactly what is demanding of myself. I understand what the work must take place, no matter if I'm hurt, sick, or whatever. You know, like last night, I was talking to my lady, and I was literally saying, "Hey, I can't come over tonight. I'm really exhausted. I need to rest." And she's like, "It's okay. I understand. Take care of yourself." And what did I do? I came home. I started watching just a movie with some friends on like an Amazon watch party, and I watched for a little bit, then I got off. What did I do to replace it? Took a shower, ate some food, and guess what? Went to my books, went to my training. I'm exhausted. And I knew that I needed a good night's rest. So instead of tuning in more to TV or doing something else, guess what? You pick up books, man. That's the fastest way to improve something in your mind, to program your mind. When you have to slow down and read, guess what? And read it over and over and train on it and find the understanding and the meaning. Guess what? Now that's a download. Now it's in your psyche. Now it's in your process of doing things. You start taking those opportunities because you understand you downloaded, now you've uploaded into your life, you make those impacts. And so as I'm bringing this to a close, this is the critical part. Very, very critical. If you want to make a comeback and an impact, understand you're going to face more adversity than you ever realize, because everything that made the condition of where you're at exist took time. So don't expect it to change fast. It's not. Like when you start to change things, you start to improve things, and you have family or friends or people that you're very familiar with and know you very well, knew the way that you've enabled things or enacted things. They understand how things have always existed, your behavior. But when you start to make those implements, those leverages, and those changes, guess what? Now they're going to have to readapt, and they will not be as supportive. They might be. Maybe you, for example, I have the nasty habit of drinking soda, but what have I been trying to do to replace that nasty habit? Guess what? I'm going through more water than I am soda. Right? That's me admitting my own stuff. And guess what? I'm not spending, what is it? I think the last time I bought a case of soda, it was $12.99 plus CRV tax, which came out to 15 bucks. 15 bucks of my money towards a product where it hurts me. That's where I took it seriously. That's where I said, all right, enough is enough. I'm diabetic. My doctor's like telling me, dude, I'm gonna have to give you blood thinners. I'm gonna have to give you statins. If you don't change, you're gonna have a heart attack, man. You're headed that way. You got blood clottages in your body. You got to change. Even my lady told me this last Sunday, she's like, babe, can you please make that change? I want you to be around for our daughter. And I said nothing. Why? Because I agreed that it needed to be done. And until I started taking action, my typical response would have said, yeah, I'll start doing it. Instead, I said nothing, and I just started doing it. And she doesn't know that, but I think she understands that. So today, it's really a decision. It's never too late for you to come back and change or to make an improvement in your life. It doesn't matter what age you are. Like I said, given the story about my grandma, she wanted forgiveness. She changed her hardened heart about something on her deathbed and told me, hey, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Which words I never thought I was going to hear, but they didn't matter whether I heard them or not, because I know that how I was raised, how I came up, the person that raised me and took care of me and saw the best for me allowed me to be who I am. And the other person, well, they were only there in spatial times and moments. But in the end, they changed, and it's okay. And I accept their change. I accept their improvement, even on their deathbed. It's not until you die that you can't change anything for your living life. So whatever it is today, if you want to improve your job, your skills, your way of outlook on life, take some time just to evaluate what it is that you want. Understand that there are things that need to take place, and they may be extremely painful, but the pain is temporary. It doesn't need to stay. Anyhow, that's all the time that I have for my Stoic Circus. I just want to say thank you to everybody who comes out. Michael, thank you so much for coming out live on Breakout. So if you want to hear me live, on YouTube and Breakout app. And you'll be able to see me Mondays and Tuesdays and Fridays. Saturdays are optional because Saturdays I may be doing a show with another friend of mine, or once or twice a month, I'll be also recording man to man voices and stories. Anyhow, I got to get going. I got to get started for work. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy yourself. Think about it. Impacts and comebacks. You got this. Take care.